My name is Nora Lane, and I haven't felt truly safe in 3 years, not in a room, not in a conversation, not even in my own skin. People say burnout feels like fire, like being overwhelmed by too much. But mine felt like nothing. A slow, hollow erasure, until one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back at us, so I left everything, the job, the apartment, the friends who only remembered me when they needed something. I packed what I could into the back of a dented hatchback and drove east until the road ran out of gas stations and cell phone signal. That's how I found it, a weathered little rental cottage on the edge of nowhere, halfway swallowed by trees, with no neighbors and no noise, just air, and space, and silence so thick it felt like it could carry you. The landlord barely spoke. Handed me a set of keys and said, "Stay as long as you want. Just don't mind the creaking. House breathes when it's alone." I thought that was poetic, now I think it was a warning. The first few nights passed in uneasy quiet. I cleaned the kitchen, rearranged dusty furniture, sat on the sagging porch and listened to the wind like it was trying to speak in a language I'd once known. Sleep came in thin, broken pieces. Dreams were always sharp and colorless, but it wasn't a dream the night I first saw the horse. It was real, too real, and I still don't know how he got inside. It started with the sound, not a bang. Not even footsteps, just breathing, not mine, something deeper, heavier. I opened my eyes in the dark, half expecting to see a man. Maybe a bear. Some shapeless figure I could rationalize away in the morning, but what I saw made my throat close. There, near the far wall of my bedroom, half-shadowed, half-lit by the weak moonlight, stood a horse, a full-grown, chestnut-colored stallion with a wide blaze down his face, his mane tangled and wild like a storm frozen in motion. His body was streaked with dirt, hooves caked in dried mud. He was still. Not moving. Not blinking, just watching me. I sat bolt upright, breath locked in my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, I just stared. I told myself it was sleep paralysis, that I was hallucinating, but I could smell him, the damp, earthy scent of sweat and hay and rain-soaked wood. My eyes flicked to the door. It was closed, the windows no broken glass, no hoofprints on the floor, just a horse in my bedroom, staring at me, and then, without a single sound, he blinked once and vanished, not with a flash, not dramatically, just gone, like mist dissolving in sunlight. I sat there for an hour, wide-eyed, frozen in my sweat-damp pajamas. Eventually, I crawled out of bed on trembling limbs and turned on every single light in the house. Nothing, no horse, no tracks, no proof, only the silence and my pounding heart. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When the sun finally rose, I stepped outside, barefoot, arms wrapped around my ribs like they could hold me together. Dew clung to the grass like glass. The air smelled of pine and old secrets. I scanned the property. Nothing, no broken fences, no signs of intrusion, just trees, and the low drone of bees somewhere far off. But when I stepped onto the porch, I saw them, hoofprints, not deep, but clear, leading up the front steps, and stopping directly in front of the door. No trail leading away, no trail leading in, just a start, like something had appeared, and then stopped. I bent down, pressing my fingers into the indentations in the wood. Real cold, slightly damp, just like the breath I had felt in the room. I didn't scream, didn't call anyone. Who would I tell? My therapist in the city, the landlord who told me the house breathed. I cleaned my face, drank lukewarm tea, walked in 2 small circles around the gravel driveway, but the thought kept circling back, louder each time. How did a horse get inside a locked house without a sound? And, more terrifying, why me? I spent the day rationalizing. Maybe I had dreamed it. Maybe the hoofprints were old. Maybe I was cracking under the silence out here. By the time the sun set again, I was convincing myself that tomorrow I'd laugh about it. Maybe even write it down as a creepy story for some podcast. But when I went to bed that night, I left the door open, just a crack. I told myself it was to let in air, but part of me wanted to see it. Catch him at 3:04 a.m. I woke up without knowing why. The house was dead quiet. My chest was tight. My eyes snapped to the door. It was wider now, open. The moonlight spilled through the hall, and I felt it again, the breathing slow, steady, not human. I sat up and froze. He was there again, closer this time, and not near the wall, but just beyond the edge of the bed. His dark eyes caught the light like liquid mirrors. He didn't move but didn't blink, didn't make a sound. I whispered, "How are you here?" No answer, just breath, deep and slow and ancient, and then, he did something impossible. He stepped forward, point one hoof, then the next, into the room, and stood beside my bed so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his massive body. I didn't reach for him. Didn't dare, I just stared up at him with my heart caught in my throat, and for one terrifying, beautiful second, I felt like something was seeing me, really seeing not the version of me I show the world, but the pieces, the cracks, the parts that had been hiding for years. Then, he turned, walked 3 steps backward, and vanished through the closed door. No sound, no creak, just gone, again. This time, I cried, not because I was scared, but because I wasn't, not when I should have been, and not when I had every reason to be. Something about his presence, his stillness, his breath, his impossible realness, had wrapped around my chest like a silent tether and told me I wasn't as hollow as I thought. I didn't sleep again. I didn't need to, because for the first time in months, I felt awake, alive, and haunted in the best possible way, because somewhere in this house, there was a horse, and he had come for me. I woke with the sunrise, though I hadn't really slept. My body had rested, but my mind hadn't stopped turning. The room still smelled faintly of earth and wet hide. The kind of smell that lingers after something real has passed through, like a campfire hours after it dies out. And the air felt heavier, like something was still watching. I sat up slowly. The door was closed, not cracked like I'd left it closed, and I hadn't moved. A chill rippled up my spine. I stood, padding across the creaky floorboards with bare feet, and opened it cautiously. The hallway was empty, and no sound, no breathing, but as I turned toward the kitchen, something stopped me cold. Hoofprints again, this time not just at the threshold, but trailing down the hallway, clear, distinct impressions of polished hoofs pressed into the dusty wooden floor. Right foot, left foot, the same slow, deliberate pattern. I followed them, heart in my throat. They led through the living room, around the coffee table, into the kitchen. The prints stopped in front of the fridge, then nothing. No trail back. No smudges on the tile. No shattered chairs. No open doors. No windows wide enough for anything that sized. It was as if a full-grown stallion had appeared, taken a thoughtful stroll around my home, and then dissolved into the air. I didn't scream, didn't laugh either. I just stood there staring at the tracks like they were a riddle the house had written for me, and deep in my gut, a thought surfaced that he wasn't a dream. He came back. And he wanted me to know it. I spent most of that morning scrubbing the floor. It wasn't about cleaning. It was about control. My hands shook as I worked, sponge after sponge soaked and tossed aside. The hoofprints lifted slowly, as if they were reluctant to leave. By noon, the place was spotless, but my head was spinning. I stepped out onto the porch, hoping the wind might untangle my thoughts. Instead, I found something else, haired out a strand, long, coarse, pale as moonlight, caught in the splintered edge of the porch railing. I touched it with 2 fingers, not white, not gray, silver, almost metallic and warm. I dropped it instinctively. It landed on the wooden step and lay still, refusing to drift in the breeze. A horsehair, silver as ash, left behind like a signature. I looked out into the trees, half expecting to see him, but there was nothing, just a forest too quiet for this time of day. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, only the silence of something waiting around. Midday, I went into the nearby village. I needed answers, or at least a distraction. The town was small, crooked, full of peeling paint and weathered signs. A single cafe, 1 general store, and a post office with faded red trim. Inside the cafe, the bell jingled as I stepped through. 2 older men turned to glance at me from their corner table. Their eyes lingered longer than I liked. I ordered a coffee, sat down near the window, tried not to fidget. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with cloud-white hair and a name tag that read Marge, brought the cup and smiled politely. "You're the one renting the Farley house," she said. I blinked. "Yeah, pretty place," she added. "Quiet. Some say too quiet." I hesitated. "Anyone ever mention animals? Wild ones, maybe? Big ones?" Her eyes sharpened. "Coyotes sometimes," she said carefully. "Deer, of course. But not many since the fires a few years ago." "Why?" I shrugged, too quickly. "Just heard something the other night." She tilted her head. "What kind of something?" I hesitated again, then decided, horse. That one word changed her face. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A flicker, not of disbelief, but of recognition. She recovered quickly. "Well, no one's Kept horses out that way in years, she said with a little shrug. Not since the Walsh Ranch shut down. Closest stable's 15 miles east. So there's no way one could have wandered in? Not without tearing half your fence down. Her eyes met mine, then softened. Why don't you come by the library tomorrow? She offered. We've got some old maps. History of the area. Maybe there's something that'll help you sleep better. I nodded. Thanks. She turned and walked away, but not before I saw her glance over her shoulder once more, like she knew something, like she remembered something, something no one had talked about in years. That night, I locked everything. Front door. Back door. Windows, even the attic hatch. I pushed a chair against my bedroom door, not because I thought it would stop him, because I needed the illusion that I still had control. I climbed into bed, pulled the covers to my chin, and turned the lamp off. The room was dark, quiet, too quiet. I stared at the ceiling. 1 minute, then 5, then 20, and oh, sound, and oh, breath, then oh, click. I froze, the unmistakable sound of something tapping on hardwood. Clop, slow. Deliberate. Closer. The chair against the door didn't creak. Didn't move, but the sound wasn't coming from the hall. It was coming from inside. My chest went tight. I sat up, eyes wide in the dark. Moonlight filtered through the curtain, and there he was again, the horse, the same deep chestnut coat, the same silver hair laced through his mane. Standing at the foot of my bed like he had always belonged there, like this wasn't a violation of physics or logic, but just a visit. He didn't move, didn't approach, just watched me, his breath visible in the cold. I reached for the lamp. Clicked it on. He vanished, not suddenly, not violently. He just wasn't there anymore, but the air was still warm, the floor still held the faint scent of hay and rain, and on my pillow was a single silver hair. I didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. Because something inside me was changing, something I couldn't explain. It wasn't fear anymore. It was pull, like the earth itself had decided I didn't belong to the world I'd left behind, and sent me this impossible creature to prove it. In the morning, I found new tracks in the living room, hooves pressed into the rug, leading nowhere, ending in front of the fireplace, and that strand of hair from my pillow, now braided neatly into the base of the lamp, like a gift, like a sign. Like he was waiting, not just to be seen, but to be understood. I thought I had already come undone, that I'd emptied myself out in quiet pieces, one panic attack at a time, until there was nothing left to collapse, but I was wrong. It happened on the 4th night. No moon and no stars, just that aching kind of dark where your own thoughts echo too loud, and nothing feels real except the tightness in your chest. It started with a phone call. A voicemail, to be precise, from my sister, her voice, cool and clipped, like always. Just checking in. If you're alive. Mom's asking questions again. I told her not to expect anything. Call me when you remember who we are. Click, that was it, and no warmth. No pause. No why. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then locked, then died in my hand. I placed it gently on the nightstand, like it might break more than it already had. Then I walked to the bathroom, and sat on the floor, hard, back against the cool tile, knees pulled tight to my chest, arms wrapped like tourniquets around my own ribs. I didn't make a sound at first, not a breath, not a word, just that tight, choked silence before the storm. Then, without permission, tears came, not pretty ones, not soft sobs with poetic grace, but raw, gut-deep, shoulder-shaking tears, the kind that make you smaller. The kind you think you've outgrown. I pressed my palm against the tile, as if the house itself could steady me, and that's when I felt it, the shift, the presence, like the air thickened suddenly, folded around me like a coat 2 sizes too big. I didn't look up. Couldn't, but I heard it, the slow, unmistakable sound. A clop, then another, closer, a clop, then silence, and breathing. Not mine, not from the hallway, but right there, in the bathroom. The light above the mirror flickered, once, twice. Then steady. Why tears slowed just long enough for me to raise my head, and there he was, Solace. That's the name that came into my mind without warning. Like it had always belonged to him. He was standing in the doorway, filling it, tall and still and real. His eyes locked onto mine, not judging, not pitying, just present. I blinked, expecting him to vanish like before, but he didn't. He took a step, hoof on tile. Solid. Echoing. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Couldn't breathe properly. He stepped again, closer, until he was just beside me. I felt his warmth before I felt his breath, then something extraordinary happened. He lowered his head, slowly, carefully, and nudged my shoulder, gently. Once I broke, I leaned into him, pressed my tear-soaked cheek against the side of his neck, felt the coarse hair and the soft heat beneath. And he didn't flinch. Didn't shift. Didn't vanish. He just stood there, letting me cry into him. As if he wanted me to. As if he had been waiting for it. I don't know how long we stayed like that. 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Eventually, my breathing slowed. My body stopped shaking, and when I lifted my head, he was still there, still watching me, like a sentry, like a guardian, like something older than pain and deeper than language. He stepped back, turned, and walked out of the bathroom. I followed. Barefoot. Quiet. Eyes wide through the hall, into the living room, where he stopped again, not at the door or not at a window, but at the fireplace. He turned his head slightly, looking back at me, and that's when I saw it, above the mantel where there had been an empty, dusty space the day I moved in. There was now a framed photograph. A black and white image, weathered and soft, out of a woman young and strong, standing beside a horse that looked almost exactly like Solace. My heart stuttered. I stepped closer. The woman's eyes looked like mine. The longer I stared, the more I felt pulled. Like I wasn't just seeing her, but remembering her, from somewhere, someone, and beneath the photo, engraved in tiny gold letters, "To those who are broken, he will come." I turned to look at Solace, but he was already gone. Again, I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fireplace, staring at the photo, tracing the lines of the woman's hand on the horse's mane. I whispered questions into the silence, not expecting answers, and still, I felt heard. Something in the house had shifted, not creaked, not groaned. Shifted, like it was settling into truth, and for the first time since I arrived, I wasn't afraid. I was curious. At sunrise, I went to the shed behind the house, at a place I hadn't touched since moving in. The door groaned open, dust curled in the air. Old tools. Rusted hinges. Coiled rope, but in the far corner, a trunk, wooden, carved with something faint. A symbol I didn't recognize. I opened it. Inside were journals, photos, leather reins, blankets, and a locket. I opened the locket with shaking hands. Inside, a photo of the same woman from the mantel, and on the other side, me, not literally, but a face so eerily similar to mine it made my breath catch. She looked younger, freer, but the eyes, the grief, the searching, that was me, back in the house. I held the locket tightly as I sat by the fire. And I whispered his name aloud for the first time, Solace. The room didn't answer, but the air warmed, like something unseen was listening, and smiling. And I stood, turning slowly, looking toward the hallway, empty, but I didn't feel alone, not anymore. Because somewhere in this house, he was waiting, not to haunt, not to frighten, but to hold. Steady. Remind me that even the broken have guardians, and mine just happened to be a horse. I woke with the sunrise, but something was different. The house felt smaller. Not cozier, tighter. As if the walls themselves had moved in during the night, trying to hold me here. I sat on the edge of the bed, the morning light sharp and accusing. I hadn't planned it consciously, but the decision came with that kind of final clarity only sleepless nights can give you. I had to leave, not because of fear, because of everything else, the weight. The questions. The slow erosion of what I thought was sanity. A horse was appearing in my house, impossibly, silently, and always when I was unraveling. He wasn't hurting me, no. But he was changing me. Or maybe just revealing things I hadn't wanted to face, and that terrified me more than hoofbeats in the dark. I needed to get out, before I couldn't anymore. By 10 a.m., I had packed a single suitcase, just the essentials. Laptop, some clothes, the locket from the shed, and my favorite sweater, the one with the fraying sleeves I'd always used like armor. I moved quickly, heart pounding with every folded shirt. As if speed could protect me from the guilt growing louder in my chest. When I zipped the suitcase shut, I heard it, the wind, sharp. Sudden, a slamming against the window pane with unnatural force. I jumped. My pulse surged, but I didn't stop. I carried the suitcase down the hall, my boots clunking too loudly against the floorboards. I didn't say goodbye to the room. Or the fireplace. Or the photograph. I just moved. I grabbed the keys from the hook by the door, fingers trembling, and reached for the handle. Then froze. He was already there. Solace is standing on the porch, still massive, blocking the door entirely. His head nearly reached the ceiling of the overhang. His chestnut coat shimmered, even in the muted daylight, and his silver-streaked mane lifted slightly in the wind. He wasn't angry. It wasn't aggressive, just present, utterly, entirely there, like a question I couldn't skip. I dropped the keys. They hit the floor with a hollow clang. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink, just stared at me through the glass, calm, unwavering, like he had known this moment was coming, and he wasn't going to move, not until I did something. else not until I faced it. I backed away slowly, the sound of my breath loud in my ears. One step, then another, until I collapsed onto the bottom stair, suitcase forgotten behind me. My fingers dug into the banister, and for the first time since arriving, I spoke aloud. I can't stay. My voice cracked on the second word. I'm not strong enough for this. Solace didn't react. Didn't shift. Didn't flick his tail. I tried again. I don't know who that woman in the photo is. I don't know why you're here. I don't know what any of this means. My throat tightened, tears threatened. I just wanted quiet. Not this. I covered my face and whispered the real truth. I'm scared I'll become her. Silence, then a movement. When I lowered my hands, Solace was gone from the porch, but the front door was open just slightly. As if he had stepped inside again, but this time, he had left the path clear, not to leave, but to follow. I walked back into the living room, and there he was, not ghostly, not imagined, but solid, standing by the fireplace, facing the photograph. As if waiting for me to look, too. I stepped beside him, close enough to touch, but I didn't. Instead, I stared up at the image. The woman's eyes, so like mine, seemed different today, not haunted, not broken, but fierce, brave. I think she was my grandmother, I whispered. Or, maybe more than that. Solace shifted, and slowly, lowered his head right onto my shoulder. The weight was real, the warmth, undeniable. I closed my eyes, and exhaled. It felt like surrender, but not weakness, like release, like I was finally putting something down that had been too heavy to carry alone. That afternoon, I didn't unpack, but I didn't leave either. Instead, I found myself walking the perimeter of the cottage, tracing hoof prints in the dirt, following a trail that led nowhere, and everywhere. At one point, I found a small patch of grass, slightly flattened, with silver hairs scattered like threads of moonlight. I sat there, cross-legged, barefoot, and let the silence hold me, not crush me, not threaten me, just hold. And eventually, I felt him behind me. At Solace. No hoofbeats, no fanfare, just his breath at my neck, and then, he lay down fully, beside me, close, but not on top of me. Not this time. As if even he understood the boundary between collapse and connection. I leaned against him, and for a while, we just breathed. The wind moved softly through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried, and inside me, something cracked open, not broken, opened. That night, I didn't lock the door. I left it slightly ajar, not as an invitation, but as a recognition. He would come if he needed to, and if he didn't, that was okay, too. I lay in bed, covers pulled to my chin, window open wide to the sound of rustling leaves. Sleep didn't come quickly, but when it did, it came gently, wrapped in the rhythm of my own breathing. I in the memory of silver hair, and the quiet weight of a presence I no longer feared. In my dream, I saw the woman again, standing in a meadow, her hands on the same horse I now knew as Solace. She looked at me, smiled, and mouthed a single word, stay. Then she turned, and walked into the woods. Solace followed, and before disappearing into the shadows, he turned once more, looked at me, and blinked, once, like a promise. Or a farewell. Or maybe just a pause, before what comes next. Somewhere between midnight and morning, the house exhaled, not literally, of course, but it felt that way, like the old wood and plaster and brick had been holding its breath for too long. Like I had. And now, finally, something inside it, all of it, was settling, and I wasn't afraid anymore, not of the creaks, not of the silences, not even of the impossible. I was ready. I stood barefoot in the center of the living room, the fireplace dark but warm with memory. I had pushed the couch aside, cleared the rug, and opened the back door wide. This time, I wasn't running. This time, I was waiting, and he came softly, quietly. No thunder of hoofs, no blast of wind, just a shift in air, and then, Solace was there. He walked in like he belonged, like he'd always belonged. His hooves touched the hardwood with reverence. His mane drifted in the evening breeze like a page being turned. His eyes, those ancient, steady eyes, met mine, and I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just whispered, it's okay. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I lay down, right there, on the floor, back against the wood, arms outstretched, exposed, unhidden, unafraid, and I waited for a second, nothing. Then I heard the sound. One step, two. Closer, and then, his warmth, his weight, not crushing, not suffocating, just there. A slow, deliberate shift as Solace lowered himself beside me, and then over me, not to trap, but to anchor, his chest draped across mine, his head resting gently beside mine. His body, massive and unmoving, became a blanket, a barrier, a bridge to something unspoken. I didn't cry, not this time, because I didn't need to. Damn, my breath matched his. My heart, for the first time in years, didn't race or stuttered. It rested. Time passed without rules. I don't know how long we lay there, me and the horse who wasn't supposed to exist. The sky outside deepened to indigo, then to black, then to something beyond black, a shade I had no name for, and in that silence, wrapped in fur and breath and something sacred, I remembered, not a flash, not a jolt, but a slow, unraveling memory. I was 6, standing on a fence post beside my grandfather's field, and there was a horse, huge, gentle, bronze like honey in the sun. He'd let me braid his mane, let me cry into his side after my parents fought, let me ride him. Once, bareback and wild, across the pasture. His name had been Solace, and I had forgotten, buried him with all the other parts of myself I thought I'd never need again. But he hadn't left me, not really yet. He had returned. I in dreams, I in grief, I in silence, and now, fully, finally, in form. My hand drifted up, curling into the thick of his mane. Thank you, I whispered, not just for tonight, but for coming back, for waiting, for staying. I woke just before dawn, alone. The floor beneath me was cold again. No hoofprints on the hardwood. No heat in the air. No weight across my chest, but something had changed. Not in the house. I rose slowly, every muscle humming with the memory of him. I walked to the door, still ajar, and stepped outside. The morning mist clung low to the grass. The world was silent except for the whisper of leaves and the distant cry of a bird waking the woods. And there, near the tree line, stood Solace, watching me, still proud, whole. He didn't approach. Didn't vanish. He simply was, and when I lifted my hand, just slightly, he dipped his head, then turned, and walked into the fog. Gone, but not lost, never lost. I stayed in the cottage after that, longer than I planned. Weeks stretched into months, but it no longer felt like hiding. It felt like healing. I repaired the barn. I restored the old photograph, framed it in gold leaf, and hung it properly. I even painted wild, strange shapes somewhere between animals and memories, between breath and belief. People asked me, sometimes, why I stayed, why I'd left behind the city, why I chose quiet. I always smiled, but I never explained, because how do you tell someone a horse taught me how to breathe again? Or, grief doesn't go away, but sometimes, it lays down beside you, and for a little while, you can rest. You don't, you just live, and let the mystery be enough. One evening, months later, a child came to visit with her parents, neighbors from down the road. She wandered into the living room, her eyes catching the photograph above the fire. Who's that? She asked, pointing, and I looked at the photo. The woman who looked like me. The horse who looked like Solace, and I smiled. That's someone who was very brave, I said. The girl tilted her head. And the horse? I paused, felt the warmth in my chest rise again. That's Solace, I said softly. He comes when you need him most. She nodded, solemn and wise, in that strange way only children can be. I think I'd like him. I nodded. I think he'd like you too. That night, after everyone left, I stood by the open window. The stars were sharp, clear, and for a moment, I swore I heard it, the faintest sound, a clop, far off, but real, and I smiled, because now, I knew he didn't have to be in the room. He didn't have to be seen. To be there. To be part of me. To stay, because once you've laid beneath something as strong and silent and sacred as Solace, you are never quite alone again, and